My wife said, "I love you as a friend but not romantically." I calmly accepted her decision and began moving out. She panicked and desperately tried stopping me, but I refused to listen. Months later, she came crawling back admitting her huge mistake. Let me paint you the picture of how 6 years and 18 months of engagement died on a Wednesday night while we were folding laundry. I'm Trevor, 34, been writing code for a living long enough to know that when systems start throwing errors, you don't ignore the warnings. But apparently I'm better at debugging software than I am at reading the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. Vanessa and I were in our Denver apartment, standing on opposite sides of our bed with a basket of warm clothes between us, and she was matching socks like it was just another evening. Nothing felt different. The TV was playing some Netflix show we'd seen a dozen times, I was folding my work shirts the way my mom taught me, and Vanessa was doing that thing where she holds up each sock looking for its partner. Normal. Boring. Then she said it. "Trevor, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." Just like that. Like she was telling me we were out of coffee or that her mom called earlier. The sock she was holding just hung there in her hand, and for a second I thought maybe I'd misheard her. Maybe she said something else and my brain scrambled it because that couldn't be what came out of her mouth. But the way she was looking at me, with this mixture of relief and terror, told me I'd heard exactly right. 6 years. 18 months engaged. And she drops that bomb while holding a polka dot sock. I set down the shirt I was folding, looked at her across that bed that suddenly felt like the Grand Canyon, and said, "Thank you for being honest with me." I walked to our closet and grabbed the garbage bags from under the sink. She watched me for maybe 30 seconds before it hit her what was happening. "Wait, what are you doing?" she asked, and now there was panic creeping into her voice. "Trevor, stop. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed, and work has been crazy, and I just..." "Vanessa," I interrupted, shoving underwear and socks into the first bag. "You can't take back what's been said." The thing is, I wasn't even angry in that moment. I was actually grateful. For weeks I'd been feeling like something was off, like I was living with a stranger who happened to look like my fiancé. She'd been working late constantly, guarding her phone like it contained state secrets, and giving me these one-word answers when I asked about her day. I'd started to think I was going crazy, that maybe I was being paranoid or clingy. But hearing her confirm what I already suspected deep down felt like finally getting a diagnosis for symptoms you've been ignoring. She followed me around the apartment as I packed, her voice getting higher and more desperate. "You're not even going to fight for us? You're just giving up?" This is exactly why I said what I said. You don't fight for anything that matters. I stopped stuffing my PlayStation controllers into a bag and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was wearing the oversized sweater I'd bought her for Christmas, her hair was in that messy bun she always did when we were cleaning, and her eyes were starting to fill with tears. 3 hours ago I would have done anything to make those tears stop. Now they felt like someone else's problem. Fighting for something that doesn't exist isn't fighting, Vanessa. It's delusion. By 1 a.m., I was carrying 4 garbage bags and my PlayStation down to my car while she sat on our couch crying into a throw pillow. My brother Eric lived 15 minutes away in a 1-bedroom apartment with a fold-out couch that had seen better days, but when I called him and said I needed a place to crash, he didn't ask questions. He just said, "Doors unlocked," and went back to sleep. That first night on Eric's couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to his neighbor's dog bark every 20 minutes, I kept replaying that moment with the sock. How casual it was. How she'd probably been practicing that line, maybe even Googled how to break up with someone gently. The worst part wasn't even what she said, it was how she said it. Like she'd been carrying this revelation around for weeks, maybe months, and finally worked up the courage to set me free. Like she was doing me a favor. I thought about all those late nights at the office, all those times she'd come home exhausted and distant, all those moments when I'd catch her smiling at her phone and then quickly putting it away when she noticed me watching. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore anymore. That polka dot sock was still probably sitting on our bed, waiting for its partner that would never come. Well, if I thought Vanessa would handle the breakup with the same casual indifference she'd used to deliver it, I was about to learn just how wrong a guy can be. The social media campaign started within 48 hours. I'd deleted Facebook years ago, but Eric still had his account, and he showed me the posts over coffee that Friday morning. According to Vanessa's version of events, I was a cold, emotionally unavailable man who'd abandoned our relationship without even trying to work things out. She painted herself as the devastated fiancé who'd made one mistake in expressing her feelings and was now paying the ultimate price for her honesty. The comments were brutal, her friends and family rallying around her like I was some kind of monster who'd left her at the altar. How could he just give up like that? 6 years down the drain because she was honest about her feelings? Men these days don't know how to fight for love. I wanted to create a fake account just to comment with the full story, but Eric talked me down. Let her have her narrative, he said. The people who matter will see through it, and the people who don't matter aren't worth convincing. Easy for him to say. He wasn't fielding 52 phone calls from Vanessa's mother asking him to be reasonable and think about what he was throwing away. Apparently, Mrs. Rodriguez had appointed herself chief negotiator in the peace talks I'd never agreed to participate in. Every call went straight to voicemail, and every voicemail was a variation of the same theme. I was being stubborn, Vanessa was sorry, and surely we could work this out like adults. By the 15th message, I started playing them for Eric's entertainment. This is better than Netflix, he said, eating cereal while his speakerphone delivered another guilt-laden monologue about how much Vanessa loved me and how rare true love was in this world. Then came the ambush. Tuesday evening, exactly 1 week after I'd moved out, Eric and I were watching hockey when someone knocked on his door. We looked at each other like deer in headlights. Eric wasn't expecting anyone, and his building required a buzzer to get upstairs. When he opened the door, there was Vanessa. Full makeup, hair done, wearing that blue dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. She looked like she was heading to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town, not showing up unannounced at my brother's crappy apartment building. "Hi, Eric," she said, like this was totally normal. "I need to talk to Trevor." I could see Eric's jaw tighten from where I sat on the couch. He'd never been Vanessa's biggest fan, said she was too high maintenance, too concerned with appearances, but he'd kept his opinions to himself for my sake. Now, watching her try to manipulate her way back into my life, those opinions were written all over his face. "Vanessa, you can't just show up here," I said, not getting up from the couch. "We broke up. That means we don't ambush each other at family members' homes." "I've been calling you for a week," she said, stepping around Eric like he'd already invited her in. "You won't return my calls, you won't answer my texts. What was I supposed to do?" "Take the hint," Eric muttered, but loud enough for all of us to hear. She ignored him and sat down on the edge of his coffee table, facing me. This close, I could see she'd been crying recently. Her mascara was perfect now, but there were those telltale red patches around her eyes that concealer can't quite hide. "Trevor, I made a mistake. I was scared about the wedding, about commitment, about becoming boring married people, and I said something stupid. But I love you. I've loved you for 6 years, and that doesn't just disappear because I had a moment of panic." I was about to respond when Eric walked to the window and pulled back the blinds. "Vanessa," he said, his voice tight with something between disbelief and disgust. "Who's in the black BMW that's been sitting outside my building for the last 15 minutes? The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. That's Blake," she finally whispered. "He drove me here." Eric let the blinds snap shut and turned around slowly. "Blake drove you here? To beg your ex-fiancé to take you back? Blake is sitting in the car outside while you tell me you love me and made a mistake." The pieces clicked into place so loudly I could practically hear them falling. Like the coworker she'd mentioned a few times over the past months. The guy who'd joined her marketing team back in the spring. The reason for all those late nights and guarded phone conversations. "Jesus Christ, Vanessa," I said, finally standing up. "You brought your backup plan to watch you beg for forgiveness? It's not like that," she protested, tears starting to flow now, ruining that perfect makeup job. "Blake is just a friend. He's been helping me get through this week, and he offered to drive me because I was too upset to drive myself safely." "Right," Eric said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Because nothing says, I want to work things out with my fiancé, like bringing another man along for moral support. She looked between us like she couldn't understand why we weren't buying her story. He's not my lover, if that's what you're thinking. We've never even kissed. He's just someone who listens when I need to talk. I stared at her for a long moment, this woman I'd planned to marry, sitting in my brother's living room defending another man while claiming she wanted me back. Get out, I said quietly. Get out of here, get in that car with Blake, and don't come back. She left sobbing, and I watched from Eric's window as she climbed into the passenger seat of that black BMW. Blake didn't even get out to comfort her, just sat there like a chauffeur while she fell apart. That night, I did the pettiest thing I could think of. I changed the password on the Hulu account she'd been using. Small victories. 3 weeks of silence later, reality came knocking in the form of a shared lease that neither of us could afford to break alone. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory that smelled like burnt espresso and broken dreams. I got there early and grabbed a corner table, partly because I wanted the tactical advantage of seeing her walk in, and partly because I needed the wall behind me for emotional support. When Vanessa arrived, I barely recognized her. The woman who'd shown up at Eric's apartment in full makeup and that blue dress was gone. This version had unwashed hair pulled back in a greasy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes that looked like bruises, and the kind of pallor you get from living on takeout and regret. She looked like she'd been hit by a truck, and honestly, I felt a twisted satisfaction seeing it. Thanks for meeting me, she said, sliding into the chair across from me without making eye contact. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying or screaming or both. We hammered out the lease details in 10 minutes. She'd keep paying her half until we could find someone to take it over or break it early. Simple. Businesslike. Almost civilized. I was gathering my papers to leave when she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Trevor, please, she said, and her touch felt like ice water. I know I messed up. I know bringing Blake that night was stupid and hurtful, but I'm not thinking clearly right now. I miss you. I miss us. I pulled my hand back like she'd burned me. Are you still talking to him? The question hung between us like smoke. She looked down at her untouched latte, and I had my answer before she opened her mouth. Blake is just helping me get through this, she said quietly. He understands what I'm going through because he's been through it too. His engagement ended last year, and he knows how hard. Let me get this straight, I interrupted, and I could hear the venom creeping into my voice. The guy who helped you blow up our relationship is now helping you cope with the aftermath of blowing up our relationship. Do you see the problem here, Vanessa? Do you see how insane that sounds? Her face crumpled. It's not like that. You're making it sound like he planned this, like he wanted us to break up. Blake just listens when I need someone to talk to. When I wake up at 3 in the morning crying because I destroyed the best thing in my life, he's there. When I have nightmares about you never forgiving me, he reminds me that healing takes time. When I'm scared that I'll never find love like ours again, he tells me, stop. The word came out harsher than I intended, loud enough that the barista glanced over. Do you hear yourself right now? You're telling another man your fears, your dreams, your 3 AM thoughts. You're sharing the most intimate parts of your emotional life with him while sitting here begging me to take you back. That's not friendship, Vanessa. That's a relationship. She shook her head desperately. No, it's not. We haven't. I mean, it's not physical. We just talk. Just talking, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of those words. The same way you were just talking to him for months before you decided you weren't in love with me anymore? The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of other people's conversations and happiness. I stood up, throwing my jacket over my shoulder. Enjoy your emotional affair, Vanessa. I hope Blake gives you all the grand passion you deserve. For months past, I'd started to think I was finally healing. Therapy twice a week, rock climbing on weekends, even went on a date that didn't end in me comparing every woman to my ex-fiancé. Then my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Natalie, Vanessa's friend. We need to talk. It's about Blake. We met the next day at the same coffee shop, which felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Natalie looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her wedding ring and ordering 3 different drinks before settling on water. I probably shouldn't be here, she started, but I can't sleep knowing what I know and not telling you. What do you know? She took a deep breath. Blake orchestrated everything. The breakup, the timing, even the words she used. He spent months telling Vanessa that you were boring, that she was settling, that she deserved grand passion and adventure. He coached her to use that "I love you but I'm not in love with you" line because he said it was the gentlest way to end things. The coffee shop noise faded to white static. What? He told her it would hurt less if she made it about her feelings changing rather than about finding someone else. Said it would be kinder to both of you. Vanessa practiced it for weeks, Trevor. She'd call me crying, saying Blake thought she should be brave and honest about what she really wanted. Natalie's voice dropped to almost a whisper. And what she really wanted, according to Blake, was him. I felt like I was underwater, everything distorted and slow. There's more, Natalie continued. Blake got transferred to Phoenix last month. Vanessa thought it was because he couldn't handle the fallout from your breakup, that he was making some noble sacrifice to give you both space to heal. She paused, looking sick. He's not in Phoenix alone, Trevor. He's there with Amy, the graphic designer from their office. The woman he was pursuing the entire time he was manipulating Vanessa. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with devastating clarity. When Vanessa found out and called Blake, do you know what he told her? Natalie asked. He used her own words. Said he loved her but wasn't in love with her anymore. Said Amy made him feel alive in ways Vanessa never could. He threw every line he'd fed her right back in her face. I sat there staring at this woman I barely knew, who just handed me the complete blueprint of my destruction. Blake hadn't just stolen my fiancée, he'd weaponized her against me, then discarded her like a broken toy when something shinier came along. And Vanessa, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, had been so easily manipulated that she'd destroyed 6 years for a man who never wanted her at all. The final act came on a Tuesday night in October when I found Vanessa sitting on the steps outside my new apartment building, soaked to the bone from Denver's first real rainstorm of the season. I'd moved into a 1-bedroom place in Capitol Hill, nothing fancy but mine, with hardwood floors that creaked in all the right places and windows that actually opened. I was coming back from rock climbing, gym bag slung over my shoulder, feeling pretty good about life for the first time in months. Then I saw her. She was huddled under the narrow overhang by the building entrance, her hair plastered to her head, wearing that same oversized sweater from the night we broke up. When she looked up at me, her eyes were red and swollen, but not from the rain. "How long have you been sitting here?" I asked, fishing my keys out of my pocket but not moving toward the door. "Since 4, she said, and it was almost 8. I called in sick to work. I couldn't stop thinking about what Natalie told you, about Blake, about everything. Trevor, I need you to know that I had no idea. I thought he cared about me. I thought what we had was real." I looked down at this woman who'd once been my whole world, shivering in the rain because she'd been too proud or too desperate to leave after the first hour. Part of me wanted to invite her upstairs, make her some tea, let her explain everything until we were both exhausted from the weight of it all. The bigger part of me, the part that had been growing stronger every day for the past 7 months, knew better. "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. "I believe Blake manipulated you. I believe you thought what you felt for him was real. I believe you're sorry." Her face lit up with something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Then we can fix this," she said, scrambling to her feet. "I know I hurt you, I know I made terrible choices, but if you understand that Blake was pulling the strings—" "Vanessa, stop." I held up my hand and she went quiet. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the overhang above us. Understanding how we got here doesn't change where we are. Even if I could wave a magic wand and trust you completely again, do you know what our relationship would look like? She shook her head, water dripping from her hair onto the concrete. "I would spend every day wondering who you're texting. Every time you work late, I'd wonder if there's another Blake waiting in the wings. Every time you tell me you love me, I'd wonder which man's script you're reading from this time." My voice was steady, calm, like I was explaining code to a junior developer. I would drive myself crazy, and I would drive you crazy, and eventually we'd hate each other for what we've become. Is that the relationship you want to save? But you wouldn't have to wonder, she pleaded. I would never. You said that before. The words hung between us like a verdict. For 6 years, you said that before. And maybe you meant it then just like you mean it now. But I can't build a life on maybes anymore. She was crying openly now, and I felt something crack in my chest watching her fall apart. Not breaking, just shifting, like an old wound finally finishing its healing. I want someone who doesn't need another man's attention to recognize my value, I said quietly. I want someone who doesn't need to be convinced that I'm worth choosing. I want someone who knows. The rain was soaking through my jacket, but I didn't move toward the door. This conversation had been 7 months in the making, and we were going to finish it properly. I love you, Vanessa. Part of me probably always will. But love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect, with loyalty, with the basic understanding that relationships require daily choices to honor what you've built together. You stopped making those choices long before Blake showed up. He just gave you permission to admit it. She leaned against the brick wall behind her like it was the only thing keeping her upright. So that's it? 7 years together, and this is how it ends? In the rain outside your apartment building? No, I said, and for the first time in this conversation I smiled. This is how it ends with both of us knowing the truth, and both of us free to find what we actually need. That's not nothing, Vanessa. That's everything. I left her there in the rain, not because I was cruel, but because staying would have been crueler for both of us. Some conversations don't end with hugs and promises to stay friends. Some conversations end with the sound of a door closing and the knowledge that you finally said everything that needed saying. New Year's Eve found me at my brother Eric's place, not because I was lonely, but because his girlfriend makes incredible tamales and I'd learned to appreciate small pleasures. We were watching the countdown on TV when Eric asked me if I ever missed her. Sometimes, I admitted, stealing one of his tamales. I miss the idea of her, the version of us that existed before everything got complicated. But I don't miss the constant wondering, the feeling like I was always auditioning for a part in my own relationship. That's growth, man, he said, raising his beer. To knowing the difference between loving someone and loving who you thought they were. I'd been in therapy for 8 months by then, learning to untangle the knots I'd tied in my own head. My therapist liked to say that forgiveness wasn't about the other person, it was about refusing to let their choices poison your future. I was getting better at that, at carrying the lessons without carrying the resentment. I'd started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee with interesting people who made me laugh. There was this woman named Sarah from my rock climbing gym who had opinions about everything from local politics to the best breakfast burritos in Denver, and talking to her felt easy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The best part was that when she texted me, I didn't analyze every word for hidden meanings. When she said she was excited to see me, I believed her. When she told me about her day, I didn't wonder who else she'd told first. As midnight approached and the ball dropped in Times Square, I thought about that polka dot sock, still probably sitting in a drawer somewhere in the apartment Vanessa and I used to share. Some things lose their partner and never find a match again. But that doesn't make them broken. It just makes them ready for something different. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that love isn't enough, that two people can care about each other deeply and still not be right together. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's growing up. And sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one.